live on Facebook. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode 7. Can you believe it? Episode 7 already of seasons 1, Innerstrength, Innercise live. Then tonight I've got the beautiful Jamie Henderson joining me. So thank you for being here, Jamie.
Thank you for inviting me along and letting me talk to your wonderful group of people.
You're most welcome. So I'm really looking forward to our topic tonight, which is finding meaning in life after the death of a loved one.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be a beautiful, real and raw conversation that we're going to get into.
Isn't that the kind you do best?
Absolutely, absolutely. So what I'd love to do is, if you're coming on live and joining us, please say hi in the chat box, send us some love and tell us where you're coming from or where you're listening in from. If you're watching the replay, hashtag replay, and feel free at any time to ask any questions, anything like that of Jamie or myself, and we'll do our best to answer them. And I'll keep my eye on the comment box. Hopefully the VAs will be joining as well, and they'll help out to facilitate things. So let's get into it. So Jamie, a little bit about Jamie. I think I've known Jamie now for, what is it, 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, I'd say about 3 years.
Right? Yeah, about 3 years. And our paths crossed on, the coaching journey as we're both studying and, self-development and digging into all of these things. And Jamie has launched her new business just recently, actually, Repurpose Facilitation, where she is a repurposing facilitator. And I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit more about that as well and the exciting journey that she's embarking on. But before we get started, I just love to really open the floor, if you like, and ask a question I like to ask most of our guests here is, what do most people misunderstand about your field of work? And given that you're just starting, but I know this is a journey very close to your heart, what is it you think that most people misunderstand perhaps about grief or loss?
Okay, all right. This one I think is going to be right in your court because I know how often you like to challenge society's rules.
I do. Bit of poke there.
Yeah. The big one for me that I think people misunderstand is we get raised with this idea of we're uncomfortable with grief. We're uncomfortable with someone expressing emotions that, quite frankly, are not happy, sunny emotions, because most of us get told that crying is bad, anger is bad, all of that sort of stuff. And the thing is, grief isn't over and done with in a week. It's not somebody dies, that's it, fine, get up, move on. And in fact, I hate the phrase moving on, because to me, moving on was always, you're leaving that part behind, but you're not. You are moving forwards, yes, but that part always comes with you. And the experience you had with that person, the life that you had with that person, even when you're no longer in that intense moments of grief, that's all still there with you. All of the memories, the impact that person had on your life, it's all still there. And in fact, I know I'm talking specifically about grief where someone has died, but grief isn't just limited to that. It can come up at any time when there is a change in life, when you have some sort of transition. It could be losing a job. I've just recently resigned, and whilst I'm still in the job, I'm working out my notice. I'm quite aware that the time I leave that office, I will probably be grieving over that for a while, because that's been my life for 15 years. I've been working in that organisation. So yeah,
it's a long impact, and I agree with you. And I know a bit of my own story as well, and certain decisions I've made in my life have led me down a path of realizing that grief is not just the physical act of a death or the loss of a family member, a friend, or an animal, even, all those sorts of things, where you are left with memories. It can just be like, for example, in my experience or my circumstances was a split of a partner and my stepchildren my dog, one of my dogs as well, they were just gone overnight. And yes, okay, I it was a joint decision in the end, to split, but it's still, I didn't realize the impact that would have and the grieving process that I would go through. So I truly understand what you're saying. It isn't just limited to the physical act of a death, for example.
No, as far as I'm concerned, if there's any time in your life where you're starting to question who you are and where you're going next, there's going to be a grieving process attached to that, because you're going to be letting go of things that were there in the past. You're letting go of all the things you thought were. And there's grief associated with that, because it's still loss. I know people who are, obviously lockdown is a very big topic of conversation these days, with New South Wales having a long lockdown, Melbourne last year having a long lockdown, and people actually needed to grieve around that, the loss of the life that they had been living, where they had the freedom to go out and do things. Like, there is still grief associated with that, because there is a change. And
I agree, and I think actually even deeper than that, Jamie, I noticed certainly with clients that I've worked with, both in the transformational space and in the business space, they're pivoting their businesses around the change of the world that we live in these days. It's not like it was 2.5 years ago even.
Definitely not.
So that in itself is, can be deemed a grieving process as such, as we pivot and change from one environment to another, because I think it's the environment, isn't it, that has a big play on the grieving process as well.
Yeah. There is a graphic that makes its way around every once in a while, where it talks about the comfort zone, the fear zone, the grief zone. Try again, the growth zone. And obviously outside of that is where all the magic happens. There is grief associated anytime you move out of your comfort zone and into the fear, because fear is a part of the grieving process. You're afraid of what has been, what is coming. It can be anything. It's fear of the unknown, obviously, because the rustling in the bushes over there a long time ago could have been a tiger, but maybe it's not. You don't know until you know. And it's, anytime you step out of the comfort zone, there is grief associated with that, because you have to let go of the ideas of who you were in order to be able to move forwards.
That's right. And I think you're exactly right. And when you were saying before, when you first started the conversation about it coming in a raft of emotions, and it's not necessarily all the happy and the sunshine emotions, it's the sadness and the dark clouds and the rainy days type of emotions. And I know you've heard me say it before, I call it my 50 shades of grey, because it really is, all emotions are valid, and it's and sometimes even with me as well, at times I think, what exactly emotion is this? Sometimes I can't even name it. It might be a feeling I've got, sort of pit in my stomach, or a gut, or a pain somewhere, or a color, or a sensation. So I really I call it fopping, feel, own, and process. And I think until you can feel it and own it and name it, you can't truly move through something. And again, I totally agree that these things, we don't just cut it off and it's finished. That's the past. It comes along with us. And I remember when I was in India writing my book, this image was following me everywhere. I saw it inlaid in tables, on walls, everywhere. And at the time, I was a bit, where you are now. I was moving out of, paid work and into, launching the coaching side of the businesses and things. And I got all the logos and everything done. And I went to the Dalai Lama's temple in Dharamshala, and I researched the actual image that was following me. And it was the endless knot. And I thought, what is this? So when I researched it, it means that your past is entwined with your present and your future. So you bring everything with you, make peace with it all. It's part of who you are, and it empowers you to move forward, which is what you were sharing earlier. So I just remember I was giggling to myself, but everything was more or less finished and done. And I rang the graphic designer and I said, look, sorry, here's this image, you've got to just fit it in the logo somehow. So she beautifully inlaid it on top of the yin yang. So, you know, when you see my image, it's another part of it, because I think it's so true. We can't just cut off that past, you know, and that's it, it's done. And it's part of who we are, and the challenge we've faced, and the strength that we've embodied to move forward. So thank you for sharing that so far. So let's get back into finding the meaning. So I guess I'd just like you to invite to share with us, you know, however comfortable you are, you know, but I'm sure, you know, you're like me, being real and raw, and you know, finding meaning in life after the death of a loved one. So I'd love you to share a little of your story, Jamie, and where it's
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I've never been secretive about what's happened to me, but sometimes because it's an open secret, and I don't generally talk about it very much. But I'm finding that the more I talk about it, the better it is for me, and the impact it has for other people has been quite amazing as well. So in 2013, he wasn't quite my husband then. We were engaged. We were planning to get married. He was diagnosed with lung cancer, and as you can imagine, world totally turned upside down. You know, we were on a path. We were going to get married, have kids. That was the direction we were heading in, and we found out that the cancer was terminal, and life effectively went on hold for pretty much 2 years whilst went through chemo. Obviously he was unwell. The chemo worked and then it didn't, and there was the building up of hope and the decimation of it, because every time we'd go to the doctor there would be more bad news. Always there was more bad news. And then eventually he died from the cancer, and by that point it had been almost 2 years, and in some ways I'd been grieving for 2 years. And certainly, as I said, life was on hold. And so I thought, he was dead, that's it, have to get up, get moving. You know, I had to go back to work, do all of the general life things that you are supposed to be doing as an adult, like going out and seeing people and all of those bits and pieces. And I thought, essentially, I had to suck it up and get on with it, because that's effectively what I got told. I think I got 3 days bereavement leave from work, which was effectively enough to cover the funeral and all the preparation stuff for the funeral. And then you're expected to rock up back to work, you know, the following Monday, as it was for me, and get on with it. And that's what I was expecting of me. And I didn't take into account the impact that grief was going to have. I thought I'd been doing it for the last couple of years, that now it was over, it would be a relief and it would all be okay. And nope, that was really just the start of it. Having said that, I spent a very long time trying to squash it down and pretend that I was okay and not grieving. And you were just talking about it in terms of the emotions. You know, you need to feel it and own it before you can process it. And there is only so much squishing that you can do before things start to erupt in inappropriate moments, like in the middle of meetings and other things like that. Yeah. But it took me a very long time to even be prepared to admit that I had emotions around it, let alone do something about it. And that was probably that was the learning curve for me.
Yeah, I just want to firstly say, Jamie, thank you so much for your openness and from that knowledge of vulnerability and sharing with us. My deep appreciation and gratitude for that, because I do know without a doubt that this will help so many people that, you know, that watch the recording.
Yeah.
And also just, I guess, to say really how difficult was it for you at the time to actually understand the emotion? Do you have any awareness around it initially?
I
going on?
couldn't. Like, I knew the stages of grief. You know, I'd read the information, I'd read about the denial all the way through to the acceptance. By the way, I do think they miss a stage, guilt. I really think that guilt should be in there, because there was definitely a lot of that. And when I talk to people, there is very, very common theme, there is guilt. For me, it was around, oh God, so many things. Obviously, there was the relief he was dead, but in some ways, that was a very minor portion of the guilt, because he had suffered so badly for so long that dying was the best thing that could have happened, certainly by the end. But the guilt was around that I couldn't keep him alive, that maybe if I'd done something different or better, that he'd still be alive, or that he wouldn't have gotten cancer in the first place, because we were never given an answer why. And that was one of the really big things for me, is I got stuck in the guilt. And because I couldn't shift the guilt and own it, I couldn't own the guilt, as you were talking about, I couldn't move past it. And
I think, I think it's worth just saying there, if that's okay with you, that I'm sure you're probably aware, but when we stay, I think guilt was one of the emotions, as I understand this, that's meant to be fleeting. Now, I say fleeting as in, we're not meant to stay in guilt for too long. When we do stay in guilt, and it happens, me included, you know, for so many of us, then it has a friend called shame, right? And shame's the backpack, you know what I mean, that jumps on the back of guilt and pushes down the guilt even more, you know, so we sort of like find it really trapped, you know, in our body. And I don't know whether you experienced that, because for me, you know, when I went through guilt through different stages, I was so ashamed of you know, of what I'd done. I just buried it even more. So, and I think it's through this vulnerable sharing, you know, again, acknowledging what you're doing now and talking about it, that you bring that shame out of the shadows, you know what I mean? You shine a light on it, don't you? And it sets you free.
There's two things I want to say in there. The first one was, I read a quote from Brene Brown, who does a lot of work around vulnerability and shame. And it was that, I'm paraphrasing, so if I do get the words wrong, please don't use me for that one. But it is basically, guilt is when you think you've done something bad. Shame is when you think you're a bad person. And when, for me, and I have a feeling, judging from what you said, you as well, when I got stuck in guilt and I internalized it so much, it became shame, because it went from I did bad things to I was a bad person because I did those bad things.
Yes, that's right.
Because guilt and shame like to breed in the shadows, and logically I knew that it was, can I swear?
Yes.
Okay, logically I knew it was bullshit. Like I knew that, I don't know, I wasn't going to be able to get him to go to the doctor any earlier and get diagnosed. And even if he got diagnosed, the outcome probably wasn't going to be any different. But the guilt likes to fester in the shadows. And because logically, you know, it's not accurate, you can't tell anybody, because they're going to look at you and judge you, and what you think, because this is what guilt and shame like to say, they're going to sit there and judge you and go, well, you're just weird. What the hell is wrong with you? Because of course that's what I was saying to myself. There was obviously something wrong with me, so I figured everyone else was going to figure there was something wrong with me too. And being able to bring that out into the light, and sometimes bringing it into the light, especially for these days now, because I've been working on it so much, it's enough to acknowledge it to myself. But bringing it into the light and being able to tell other people was really what made the difference. Of course, I had to find somebody that I didn't think was going to judge me, which when you're in the middle of that sort of shame shitstorm is a very tough thing to find. Only because brain likes to tell you that everyone will judge you.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's where, for me, when I came into coaching, that's where that made a bit of a difference, because we obviously get taught that you suspend judgment, you suspend your judgment of the other person, because how that person has lived and the stories that they have, you know, they're going to be different to yours. That's and that's okay. And judging somebody on how they think or feel or respond to a situation because of how you would isn't useful for anybody.
That's very true. Very true.
So it's and then the second
yeah.
I had a second thing to say, and now I've forgotten what it was. Oh, if it's important, it will come back.
It will come back. Because I think as well, you know, having had the realization then and the, you know, the awareness around the guilt and the shame, etc. What did you do next then? So obviously you embarked on your coaching journey. So how did you sort of find meaning, you know, again, and joy in life, and you know, and the purpose, the path that you're on now?
I'm reading a book at the moment, and it's written by one of the authors, or one of the researchers around the stages of grief. And it's that awareness, coming back to things 20 years later or whatever it is, that actually after acceptance there is something else. There is the need to find meaning in you know, obviously in death, before you can actually start to find hope again. And that was, I remember, that was probably one of the biggest, or probably two big thoughts that I carried through me when I was really in the grief storm. The first one was I was broken and I didn't think I could ever be fixed again. And the second one was that I felt hopeless and helpless. And things only started to turn around for me. And I would say now, certainly, that I've progressed through, you know, the worst of the grief, the most of the grief. I'm now through into that stage where I managed to find meaning. And I now look back and I'm like, actually, as terrible as it may sound, I'm grateful that it died, because if that hadn't happened, I would still be the same person I was before, which was anxious, negative, very critical of myself, stuck in a job that I didn't like. But because that happened and I had to effectively recreate my life from scratch, I decided to make it a much better one. You know, I'm like, well, if I'm going to do this, I might as well make it a fucking good one.
That's right. No, and again, I just want to acknowledge that, because that's not an easy thing to say.
No,
you know, it really isn't. And I think it's true for a lot of people. There are so many blessings and realizations that come out of bad shit, shall we say, you know, stuff that goes on in life, the challenge and the obstacles, and, you know, things that life throws at us. And I think that there's a saying as well, again, I probably get it totally wrong, but, you know, like, we're only given what we can handle, right? You know what I mean, in life. And I think, I just believe it's true. You know, we somehow we feel sometimes that we can't cope, or we're not going to get through it, but we find the strength and the courage, and often the people to help and support us, you know, that we can resonate with, to move through it. So again, I want to thank you for being so open about that, because that's not an easy thing to say. And I think it's a thing that a lot of people would like to say, but they don't dare.
Yeah. And that's the thing, you know, I mean, finding meaning could be anything. You know, like, I'm never going to understand why it had cancer, or, you know, why it was lung cancer and terminal, because there was no family history, there was no environmental reasons why. So I'm never going to understand why that's happened.
Yeah.
What I can do, though, is, you know, by finding meaning in having that happen. So for me, it's obviously being able to change my life, to grow as a person into, I now call myself a grown-ass adult.
Love it.
Which is about being effectively it's being a healthy adult. You know, I mean, I was always a functional adult, but living with anxiety and stress and pain.
You weren't adulting, right?
You're not adulting.
No, I know.
No,
I totally understand it. Yeah, totally.
I felt like I got stuck in rebellious teenager for a very long time. But I had to try and do these things because, you know, you're over 30, you're supposed to be whatever.
But having said that, functional rebellion, I think, is fun as well.
Yeah.
You know, and again, it's just the amount of time that you spend in that cycle, isn't it, really, when you understand the cycles, you know, that you can go through. I think rebellion is a functional part of the journey, because to me, it's giving yourself permission to do something you've never done before. You know, but if it is something that's sort of not necessarily reckless, but, you know, out there or different, perhaps you don't want to stay in that you know, what word I'm trying to think of, in that stage, you know, for too long, you know. But yeah. I love the fact that my you know, rebellion was all around. I'm actually doing what I want to do, you know, stuff. Yeah. I used to call myself #FJFU, you know. I'm doing what I want to do, you know, fuck everyone else. And because I've never done that before, I was always doing what everyone else wanted, what everyone else expected. So it was and I loved it, Jamie. I loved that stage. So I probably stayed there longer than any other stage, you know. But and now I get balance. I know I can do what I want, but I can also do for others. Yeah. You know, so the balance comes back again naturally when you give yourself permission, you know, for those things.
Yeah, I'm talking, you know, old days. It was the FU, but it was what it was because I had such demanding expectations of myself, which were unrealistic, and I couldn't do them. So I would rebel and not do things that were probably important things, because as an adult you have to do shit like pay your taxes.
Yeah. So, oh, been there, done that. I'm with you. Yeah, I'll do everyone else's taxes. I mean, I'm an accountant, for heaven's sake.
Yes.
My own, no, didn't bother doing those. Left that. It's funny how the things that we do, isn't it? Yeah. Yep. We learn and grow from that, though, hey?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, I now pay an accountant because I am aware that there is probably still a part of me that is not inclined to do some of these things, but that's something that I've realized and I've learned, and that's okay. It's like I have cleaners because I hate housework. And after years of forcing myself and rebelling and not doing it and living in a filthy house, I'm like, I'm just going to pay somebody. I don't like the job, so why am I making myself do that?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. So where's life taking you now, Jamie? What's the path? What's next for you?
So as I said at the start, I've actually resigned from the job that I have. Well, that's not fair. I haven't been in the job for the last 15 years. I've been in the organisation for the last 15 years. I've done a few various jobs. So I have recently resigned from that one, and I am actually about to be launching into my business full time. Because, well, I suppose there's a couple of things. One is I like to walk the talk, and I figure that if I am going to be helping people to create the life that they want to be living after somebody's died, after they've been through a massive transition, then actually it's time for me to do the same thing as well, and to stop letting fear get in the way. And the second part is, which is what I said at the beginning, is if I'm going to try and, if I need to create a new life, I want it to be an amazing one, and for me this is a part of making that amazing.
Beautiful. I love it.
I'm talking about the meaning in, for me, the meaning in Ed's death. Part of what I actually realized out of all of that was I was living somebody else's life, essentially. I mean, I focused on him for so long that he was essentially center of my life, but even outside of that, the work I was doing, after I left uni and I couldn't find work in the area I wanted to work in, I kind of just fell into things, and I started to do jobs because somebody else was doing it and enjoying it, and thinking, oh well, if I like that person and they're doing this job, then I'll like it too. And I also got very confused with being good at something and liking something, two very different things.
Definitely, that's definitely very true.
And when you can be good at something that you like, then that is an absolute game changer. So I'm now moving into doing something that I like and I'm good at.
Yeah. That's awesome. So will you be launching programs and things? What does the business look like? What do you intend doing? Or are you still mapping out? Where are you up to with it?
I'm still mapping. Where I'm actually starting with is, because grief is such a personal journey, and obviously where people want to move to is a very personal journey. I actually do work individually with people to effectively provide the support that they're needing at that point in time, because, you know, like for me, I got stuck in expressing emotions. I couldn't own that. So for me, that work was really important. But for someone else, maybe they're very, very good at owning their emotions and they're okay with being angry and being sad, and they're moving through the guilt stages reasonably quickly. Where they're stuck at is understanding their strengths and where they can take their strengths moving forwards, because when somebody dies, you are not the same person after that. The experiences that you've had, the growth that does happen, even when you are stuck in grief, you are still growing and changing, because experiencing that level of emotion, you can't stay as the same person.
Yeah.
So there will be changes in life. You know, it's not just square peg in a round hole. You're now an octagonal block trying to fit into a round hole. So,
and I love that, because I really feel with the niche that you're working in, you know, doing one-on-one work will give you, I'm sure over time you will see the synergies, you know, of the things that crop up, and then you'll be able to, you know, perhaps work on these elements, you know what I mean, in sort of like either group program or, you know, different sort of products and things that you can roll out to help people. So I think there's a big future in that, and I think a lot of people, you know, well, I don't know a lot of people that deal in this area, you know, honestly, and yet I come across a lot of people who are struggling, you know, with grief. And yes, I can help, you know, with certain things, but I think it's fantastic now I have somewhere to be able to refer them to, someone that can actually, you know, focus and really help them one-on-one, because I think there's probably always going to be an element of one-on-one in that type of work.
For sure,
Because
definitely.
there can be certain modules that people could perhaps work through, but I think a lot of people will need that, you know, one-on-one contact and certain elements of that.
Yeah, and the thing is, as humans, we connect through our emotions. And so having a person who is there, who is prepared to spend the time with you and listen to you as you're working through the emotions, for me, I know I was actually quite lucky, because, again, sounds dreadful, doesn't it? My stepfather died shortly before my husband did. So I had my mum going through the same sorts of things that I was going through. So we could connect, because we were both living that experience at the same time. And whilst I could kind of talk to friends about stuff, they couldn't understand in the same way, because there is something very valuable in having that lived experience.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you have a beautiful bond, or a deeper bond and connection now with your mum.
Yeah, definitely.
That's beautiful. Yeah, Abby's just she just joined us as well, saying hi, and she said she remembered when her mum died. She felt she's a different person already as well. I think she's saying that she's grown through her own grief journey, which I think, you know, I think at some point everybody recognizes that, you know, they see strengths, and a lot of people say as well that, and I believe it to be true actually, that when someone that we love passes away, or there is a severing of a relationship, I believe that although that person is gone, the traits and the characteristics that we connected with that person show up in someone else. You know what I mean? And it's just for us to connect with that other person in our lives again. So it's sort of like it morphs from one person to another, you know what I mean? So if there's something that you needed, like for example, something you got, I know for example with my relationship with, you know, my ex-partner when we split up, and that, well, and the children specifically, there was things that I missed. And within a couple of weeks, you know, I'd met someone else and connected with them that had young children, you know, and I would go around sometimes and connect and just have tea. And so I was getting this interaction with children that I wasn't expecting again, you know, periodically. So it's amazing how I think things show up and we don't always see it, you know, but when we sit back and reflect afterwards, think, yeah, okay. Or, you know, it's like someone, if like, for example, I was on my own in a big property, so my neighbor would come and he would mow the lawns, he would do things, do some gardening, you know, all those things that I think, you know, how on earth am I going to do all this now? And I'm sure you, when you think about it, would have had the same. You know, people, yeah. But at the time, we don't see that, you know.
Oh, no. No. I mean, you know, for me, I am an introvert, so I'm generally quite self-reflective anyway. But going through grief, I would say I was probably, I'm going to go self-absorbed, which usually has negative connotations to it, and we usually deem somebody egotistical. But what I mean was I had to turn my attention inwards to try and figure out what was missing and what I needed. For other people, they turn that outwards because it's the reflection from another person that says, this is what I'm needing, this is what I'm missing right now.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, the difference between the introverts and the extroverts, how we actually analyze things. Yeah, because someone once told me, you know, the gentleman concerned, that I was, you know, a bit of an introvert. I thought, me? No, I'm like, you know, always with people, happy, you know, this stuff. And you know, he was right. The more time I spent alone, you know, over the last few years, I enjoy my own company. I just hadn't learned to be alone. And I think that's one of the biggest things. So now I'm really grateful for that, because I actually don't have the fear around anyone leaving my life, because I know I'm going to be okay no matter what. And that's a huge relief, especially given the fact of, you know, where we are in, you know, this moment. Like, all my family is all in England. I can't see them, I can't get there, I can't travel. We all have different views on, you know, vaccinations, do we, don't we, whatever. But so that could well prevent me from traveling. And, you know, and so you have to, but I have this weird sense of calm around it, you know, and I just make use of the time that we have and the connections, and, you know, we just have to wait and see how the world moves on, what changes, evolves.
I'm sorry, my cat's decided that apparently I've talked for long enough. It's his turn.
Must be dinner time nearly. I think we're probably just going to wrap up. I think, is there anything else you'd like to share, Jamie, with the viewers that could come on and listen?
There are many things that I could move into. I think we've had a fabulous conversation today, and I do want to say thank you for letting me open up about some of these things, because, as I said, grief is still a bit of a taboo subject. And this idea that actually it is okay, grieving is healthy and normal and natural, and the fact that we're, in some ways, when somebody dies, in fact, you know, we'll go back to, you can experience grief at any kind of transition. It's this taboo, and nobody wants to talk to you, and it's kind of dirty and shameful. So it's nice to bring, and like we're talking about with shame, it's nice to bring this into the light and say, actually, it's normal, and however you respond is completely normal, and it's okay. And I will reaffirm that, you know, when you can start to find meaning in the events that have happened, and that's when you can start to hope again, and that's when things start to light up.
Yeah, and that's so true. And I think often as well, it's the others, people in our life or around us, that really don't know what to say. to a grieved person, you know, to
Yep.
someone who's experiencing loss and, like I say, transition of whatever kind. They really just do not know what to say. So they say nothing. And that often, I see so many friendships and, you know, families ripped apart because there has just been the silence. No one, they don't know how to handle or to say. So I'm sure, you know, if anyone's any questions around that, you know, when you're watching the replay, please ask them, you know,
Please.
the comments in, tag Jamie or I, and, you know, I'll make sure Jamie sees it and we'll respond, because I think sometimes that even could be a different conversation we could have later, Jamie, really, because I think that's a big thing. It's how to connect and communicate with someone who's grieving. You know, it's a big thing that people don't know what to do. They don't want to cause more upset, so they say nothing, and then that's, you know, even worse sometimes.
The one I like to call the silver lining sympathy, but yes, we'll get into that one another time.
Beautiful, love it. So I'd love you, if you have anything you want to give away to the viewers or connect with, please feel free to drop a link, or just, you know, where we can connect with you. I know you've got a beautiful Facebook group that's very motivational and real and raw. So if you want to drop a link in there, anyone can, you know, connect and find you, come along and join you there as well.
It'd be wonderful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So thanks very much, Jamie, and
thank you
everyone, and we'll see you again same time, same bat channel next week.
Indeed.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.